So I have three topics that I want to talk about today. As I'm talking through these topics at literally any point in time, feel free to just drop questions in the chat, either on TikTok or on YouTube. But I wanted to focus on talking about three study strategies that I love. Probably heard me talk about all three at some point or another. And I'm going to put it all here. Now, if you've never attended these kinds of lives before, because sometimes I do just chit chat live, sometimes I'll do co-working or playing video games. This live is it is more planned out than the other one. So I do have things that I want to go over and I have notes. So I'll be looking at my screen every once in a while because what I do is we talk live. So if you attend live, you get to see all the fun stuff. But if you don't get to show up live, I take the video and I cut it up and I put it back on YouTube. And so I want it to have a little bit more structure than us winging it in our conversations. But that doesn't mean we can't chit chat. That doesn't mean we can't just, deviate or switch into a different topic for a little bit. But the three strategies that I want to talk about are sentence building, which is my favorite strategy and actually what I've been doing for the past 2 months, like heavy focus on it. Shadowing, which is my go-to for speaking and improving my intonation. And then comprehensible input, which I know I've made a few videos on TikTok about, and I have a blog post on. So I want to break all those things down, answer questions. Also, if there are other strategies people are looking for, want to share those as well. But these are the three that we're going to focus on for today. And I figured we could start off with comprehensible input. If you've never heard me talk about comprehensible input before, or you've literally never heard of it before, comprehensible input is really just any content, whether it's audio or like written stories, text, whatever it is, that is slightly above the level that you are currently at. So basically, it is easy enough that you can understand things in context, but it is hard enough or difficult enough that it is challenging you to interpret things that the person is saying or that is written. You love shadowing, sing at least 2 songs in all 4 languages. Okay, so we have a shadowing fan here. Love it. Yeah, I do it all the time. And my little bubble where I'm kind of saying gibberish because I'm not paying attention to what people are saying. But when it comes to comprehensible input, it's comprehensible input for you because there's not like a universal resource. It's not like you go on YouTube or you Google comprehensible input, you find something and it's like, this is comprehensible input for everyone. Comprehensible means that you can understand it. So what is comprehensible input to one person might actually be gibberish or too complicated for another person. So you really have to dial into what you can understand personally. But things are explained within the content. So sometimes there's content that we listen to or read that doesn't really explain things well because it expects you to know what they're talking about. That might not be comprehensible input for most people, but there might be, phrase videos, podcasts that have a theme, get ready with me videos, things like that they're kind of explaining what they're doing and there's visuals involved a lot of the time to help you understand. Or with a book, they're building the story to help you understand what these words and what these grammar points mean in context. Definitely want to shadow more. Yes, it can be so helpful. Absolutely. And so I love comprehensible input because it really helps us to do kind of what we do in our native language, which is understand words in context. There are a lot of words that we know in our native language when someone else, I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but I have, where some of my friends who are not native English speakers, when we're talking about something, they bring up a word and they're like, Bront'e, what does this word mean? And for a moment, I'm like, it's sort of like, and I don't have an actual definition without using the word in the definition. And so I either have to actually look it up to give a better explanation, or that's when I go into stories and comparisons. I'm like, well, it's kind of like this thing. It's a little bit like that. It's used sometimes in these situations, which is the comprehensible input part, because I'm explaining the words in our language, in English, versus defaulting or switching to like my friend's native language, maybe like Japanese or Spanish, and explaining it to them in that language. So I think most of the resources, if not every resource that I use, minus things for Russian, because Russian is still baby beginner. No, actually, no, that's a lie. Okay, 95% of the resources that I use are comprehensible input resources. So even with my Russian, where I barely understand what's going on, I listen to podcasts completely in Russian. And sometimes the Russian podcast is explaining things in Russian about the words that it's teaching. And I'm like, okay, I think I understood what that is through context. Now, a lot of times, because it's a beginner language, I still have to look things up. There's still a lot of things I don't know. But for languages I'm more familiar with and more comfortable using, like Spanish, Japanese, Korean, and French to an extent, I still do that with those as well, because it also helps you to shift out of leaning on your native language. So at some point in our language studies, it is really important for us to stop using our native language and start, going into like monolingual learning. So using the language to learn the language, using Japanese to help us learn Japanese, using Italian to help us learn Italian. And so comprehensible input can help with that, because it gives you something that, one, you chose the resource. 90% of the time you weren't forced to listen or to read that thing. So you chose the resource. Hopefully it's something of interest to you. And so you have that motivation of, I want to understand this because I like it, or I want to understand this because it's interesting. And you're putting all of the things that you've learned into practice. You're like, okay, how much of this do I understand? You might use even more specific strategies around comprehensible input, like sentence mining. You might decide to do summaries afterwards, either verbal summaries and recording yourself or writing them down. But comprehensible input is like the core. You're like, I'm going to start with this kind of resource. It's more like a resource than a strategy, I guess. It's a little murky area. But when we're learning words, we take in that information based on, direct definition, or someone explaining with an image, a situation, a comparison. We take that info in, and then we form our own understanding, or we develop that idea even further based on more context. When we see other people using it, when we start to use it, and someone might say, oh, we don't use that word that way, we actually use this word instead, or like, technically that's correct, but no one ever says that. How many of us have said that or have heard that from someone who knows the language that we're learning? And so I think it's one of the best things that you can do for your language studies long term.